Hey, well, what's up, Colliders? Welcome back to The Collision. Daniel here to talk about murder. That's right, A Haunting in Venice, the latest in the kind of Agatha Christie inspired murder mysteries, is hitting theaters this weekend. I've seen it, so let's talk about it. So like I said, this is sort of the third in the, Agatha Christie trilogy by Kenneth Branagh, following the Murder on the Orient Express in 2017, and then the Death on the Nile, which came out last year. And once again, as with those two films, Kenneth Branagh once again does double duty, both as the director of this film as well as in the lead role of sort of the brilliant but quirky detective Hercule Poirot. And thankfully, he also brings back this immaculate mustache for this film. And kind of unlike like Rian Johnson's popular Knives Out trilogy, there's been some murder mysteries sort of out there in Hollywood lately. But there's something refreshing about sort of the Kenneth Branagh approach to these Agatha Christie movies, sort of a more throwback, traditional approach to like the whodunit genre rather than a real kind of contemporary thing. And I've liked both of the first two in this trilogy, I guess. I enjoy these kind of movies. I thought those movies were well made. They were fine for what they were. And Haunting in Venice is also a solid, well-crafted, entertaining film, which I think it is sort of bolstered by a really good cast. It has a very immersive, sort of spooky, gothic aesthetic that I did find effective. And the mystery itself, obviously, you got to get that right. It is an intriguing mystery, but perhaps most surprising for this film, which I wasn't expecting going in, is that it also just offers very, at least what I found fascinating, spiritual themes, exploration of God and the afterlife, and some fascinating conversations. So we'll definitely get into that at the end of the review as well. So while overall, I quite enjoyed this movie. I like this movie a lot. I would say that probably every aspect of this film kind of ranges between like fine and good, without ever like elevating or plummeting to like either extreme ends of the spectrum. There's no real this sort of show-stopping scenes or standout characters or set pieces that just sort of knock you over and blow you away. But kind of on the other side of that, there's really no noticeable conspicuous like faults or areas that you can really nitpick or just say, hey, that didn't work, or this character was bad, or like the filming of this was bad. Everything kind of just lands like comfortably in that middle range of just well executed. It's good, not great, not bad. It's just good. I would say for this sort of movie, that's all I'm expecting, or all I really need it to be. One characteristic that does sort of differentiate this murder mystery from like the other two, the Death on the Nile or Murder on the Orient Express, is that it does have a much darker atmosphere and kind of gothic aesthetic. The story itself takes place on Halloween in a very kind of eerie mansion, which the characters believe to have been haunted by these vengeful souls of children that are mad at adults for mistreatment. And even like the inciting incident of this film involves characters conducting a seance and kind of bringing in a medium as a grieving mother is trying to commune with her daughter who has tragically died. And obviously just hearing that explanation is probably going to spook away some Christians, just sort of some of that, like, at least outwardly kind of gothic or occultish or kind of witchcraft and some of that aesthetic, although without obviously without diving into any of like the spoilers. I'll just say that, as is probably expected for a movie like this, not everything is as it initially seems, and there is sort of a lot of the tension in this film is the characters trying to figure out, like, is this actual demonic spiritual powers, or is there just sort of more things going on behind the surface? Although I will say too that although there are obviously some spooky sort of Halloween-esque elements, this movie really isn't a horror film. There are some jump scares and some sort of frightening images and kind of this like the mood that sets the tone for this movie, but they never become the focus. They really remain sort of the backdrop, kind of adding the melancholy backdrop to the more central mystery, like the character drama that's happening. Speaking of the mystery, obviously that's the thing that any murder mystery film has to get right. It has to be a good mystery. And I think overall this mystery is effective. It is engaging, sort of as it sort of the slowly unraveling plot and the clues. Although I do think, which is a comment I had with I know the last couple of these films, is that it doesn't necessarily give audiences enough information where they can kind of have the satisfaction of figuring things out. There's always more information that you don't have, and you're kind of hopeless to sort of play along, which I know, at least for me, is some of the fun of these movies. It is a bit more of like a passive experience where you kind of have a hunch about what characters might be good and their motivations, but mostly you kind of sit back and watch as Perot kind of does his deductions and figures it out on his own. Although I also will admit that I am not typically the kind of guy that can see plot twists and things coming ahead of time, so maybe you guys will have more success with this movie figuring it out than I did. Another carryover from the previous Agatha Christie films is that A Haunting in Venice has an impressive sort of collection of talented actors and actresses. Obviously, Kenneth Branagh is the center, the star of this film, and he is excellent. Again, he's able to communicate some kind of subtle emotional depth, which really does help kind of humanize his character and keep him from being this sort of a cartoonish sort of caricature of the quirky detective. So he definitely brings his A game to this film. Tina Fey is also making her first appearance in this, sort of the comedian actress, as a detective writer and kind of longtime friend of Perot. And she's great in this movie as well. She does add, she's not just like a comedic character, but she does add some levity and some humor in a film that really does need some of that. And probably the other standout in this movie is Michelle Yeoh, who plays probably the most mysterious. She plays like the medium spiritual character in this, a very kind of enigmatic role. And she is great. She kind of keeps the audiences guessing throughout the entirety of this film. As far as content to consider, things going on the surface of this film, really not a whole lot. Language, there are a handful, 5 or 6 sort of minor profanities in this film, as well as God and Christ are used on several occasions, kind of misused on several occasions. So there is a bit of minor profanity, but nothing major there. Sexuality, nothing as far as sexuality goes. Violence, obviously this wouldn't be a murder mystery without murder. So there is some violence as would be expected. There are several like on-screen deaths, or at least like the aftermath of the death. Like a character, there's characters that get drowned or impaled on an object or stabbed with a sharp object. Although none of the deaths are overly gruesome or bloody. Even if they are intentionally supposed to be sort of shocking and disarming, you don't see a lot of blood or gore or anything in that way. And then there's also this like talk of violence, like the legend of the children that have died in the house. So there is sort of talk as well, although you don't see any of that on screen. As far as this other, like I said, spirituality plays a central role in the story. We'll unpack a bit of that in just a second. But again, the action takes place on Halloween night. There's a medium, although her credibility is sort of questioned and by people around her. There's mention of like a Ouija board and crystal balls, although you don't see those. The character doesn't use those objects. She does perform a seance in the film to try and communicate, which is very portrayed in a way that like a typical horror movie, like where there's sort of demonic implications and spirits, and it's supposed to be very kind of creepy and possession. Although much of the tension of this film is the mystery of like, is that authentic? Is there really spiritual dark powers going on in that moment, or is it just a sort of a big ruse? And is she a fraud? So there's some of that. There's a young boy that claims to be able to speak to the very sort of sixth sense, speak to like the ghosts in the house, although that is neither confirmed or denied, and you don't like see that happening. This is sort of him claiming to be able to do that. Another character in the house is like a former nun who does have sort of these like deep sort of Catholic convictions. At one point she quotes from Exodus 22:18 about kind of witchcraft, and she believes in sort of the demonic material, but also in God. At one point she sort of tells a character, she's only answerable to one person, and that's not him, obviously implying God. So there is sort of spirituality and spiritual characters all throughout this film. As far as themes going on beneath the surface of this film, kind of a continuation of that spiritual stuff, kind of deeper than just the outward sort of Halloween vibe and aesthetic, kind of the gothic tone of the film. One of the most welcome surprises for me in this film is just how central and frequent discussion of God and faith are, because Perot is very much invited to attend this party, the seance, to investigate the medium with the intention that he expects to find out that she's a fraud and that there is, she's not actually communing with spirits. But what becomes clear kind of throughout this film is that really the more pressing or like deeper investigation is just the existence of spiritual realities at all. Kind of less just a mystery about death and more a mystery of sort of life after death. Is there souls? What is sort of the spiritual reality of our world we live in? And in the original Agatha Christie novels, the character of Perot is a practicing Catholic. He is a man of faith. In the movie version, A Haunting in Venice, he's not. He's more of a. He explains that he's lost his faith. He's more of like an atheistic skeptic that maybe at one point was a man of faith, but no longer believes. So there is a conversation that he has with Yo's character where she says, "You don't believe in the soul's endurance after death," and he says, "I have lost my faith." She says, "How sad for you." And then he replies, "Yes, it is most sad. The truth is sad." So a lot of this story really is his, obviously he's trying to solve the case and the murder and some of that, but a lot of like the more personal story for kind of character arc for him is just to explore the soul. Is there a God? He kind of explains that if he can find that there actually is spiritual stuff going on, then that would prove that there is a soul, and if there is a soul, then that would prove that there is a God that gave us a soul. So it really is sort of an investigation of God, of faith, and even although he is portrayed as like a very rational-minded, kind of atheistic skeptic, he's not necessarily someone that's angry at religion or sort of a stereotypical caricature atheist in that way. He does present himself very much as a man that wants to believe, but he just sort of there's a tension between sort of what his rational mind and then like the supernatural reality, and he can't seem to make those two come in sync with each other. And really, he's not the only character that's sort of on that journey. It's kind of the main question that a lot of these characters are asking throughout the film is this: how do we interpret experiences that we can't fully explain? And then like, at what point is faith required when we don't have all the answers or the explanations? And kind of different characters wrestle in that in different ways. And obviously this isn't like a faith-based film. There isn't a triumphant, Christian conversion in the third act of this film. It is a lot more ambiguous. And I think as Christian viewers, there'll be different opinions as far as whether this film sort of lands in a way that's like embracing and open to faith, or whether it kind of lands in a place that's dismissive of faith. But at least to me, I was less interested in sort of where the film landed on some of that, and more just engaged with the question and like the exploration and the journey of the characters, which is just, it's, at least to me, it's a fascinating and it's a refreshing thing to kind of find in like a mainstream Hollywood film. So in the end, I enjoyed this movie quite a bit. I think kind of due to its subject matter, it is sort of inexplicable that this movie wasn't released like in October, close to Halloween. It seems like that would be a perfect spot to land this movie. Although that being said, I think A Haunting in Venice very much is like the epitome of like a September movie. It kind of lacks the bombastic spectacle of sort of a summer popcorn flick, but it does have enough sort of engaging drama and just sort of is a refreshing throwback mystery sort of to the whodunit genre that I think there is a lot for viewers to enjoy and kind of get immersed in the story of this film. And I do think also, like I said, while I think the horror aspect and then also some of the like outwardly seeming occult stuff and things in the film will probably spook some Christians away and just be something that they're not interested in or they just don't feel comfortable seeing. But I do think for a Christian audience that do choose to see this movie, there is a lot to enjoy. It is an engaging movie, and I do think the spiritual themes and the questions that are asked do provide a lot of just sort of fodder to meditate on and to work through. But hey, let me know what you guys think. If you guys check out this movie, we'll love to hear your thoughts. Jump in the comments section. Let me know if you enjoyed it. If you didn't enjoy it, sort of what you thought of some of the spiritual themes. And if you were smarter than me and you figured out the mystery where I was ignorant, go ahead and brag about that as well. But most of all, guys, I want to encourage you, if you guys haven't done so, subscribe to our channel, become a Collider. I got a lot of movie reviews and live streams and this other fun stuff. Would love to have you be a part of that. But thanks for watching. Stay safe and continue to collide with your world for Christ.